Hey everybody, it's Jay Dickey with American Heritage Partners. I'm here to tell you about an amazing event we're going to be hosting coming up on February the 28th in Reno, Nevada. It's on a story that I think gets very, very little attention, and it really should. It's the story of the female spies of the Civil War. And our guest performer is going to be Kim Harris, who's with me here today, a well-known Chautauquan. She's going to be performing the role of Elizabeth Van Lew, who was probably the most famous female spy of the Civil War, if not the most famous spy of all time in the Civil War. And she lived in Richmond, Virginia, which during the Civil War was really the heart of the Confederacy. That's where Jefferson Davis was headquartered, and the brain trust of the Confederacy was right down the street from her. Essentially, and it was there that she was able to extract some of the most critical intelligence about what the Confederate Army was up to during the Civil War, and in the process of that she saved scores and scores of Union soldier lives in the process. So I'm really thrilled to have Kim here with me in Dayton, Nevada, where she's going to tell us more about the story of Elizabeth Van Lew. And Kim, welcome to Dayton.
Well, thank you, Jay. I'm very excited to be here in Dayton and to share a little bit of Elizabeth with your viewers.
And Kim, we've known each other for several years, and I've seen you perform, but many members of our audience really don't know who you are, and they probably don't even know what a Chautauquan is. No. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself and about this concept of Chautauquan.
Well, Chautauqua is essentially living history in first person, and I've been doing that for well over 15 years. I just kind of started it accidentally, didn't know I was doing that, but it's a very interesting and fun way to share history for people who may not wander into a museum, be able to get to a museum to learn about a particular person or subject. They may not pick up a book, but they can come be inspired to learn more or find out about somebody in a very interesting performance sort of way. And I've really enjoyed bringing people, certain characters to life.
And I think I heard you say you just kind of stumbled into it.
I stumbled into it, yes. It had to do with the Pony Express. We were just talking about the 150th anniversary way back when, and I dressed up as one of the Pony Express riders. By no stretch of the imagination was I an 18-year-old, 120-pound boy riding for the Pony Express.
A cross-dresser.
A cross-dresser. But when I did that, I later found out that what I was doing is I was doing living history, and I was able to bring to life that time period for people so they could see how somebody dressed and talked and what they experienced. And so from there on out, I had the bug.
So in that example, your character, not necessarily famous or well-known, you've done both famous characters and maybe some not so famous characters. What are the ones that are kind of your top of the list, the ones you've most enjoyed doing?
Well, I have about 22, and I started doing mostly Nevada because that's where I was interested in, but my husband actually said, you can't go portray some of these Nevada characters, back east in New England or a place like that. They wouldn't know or wouldn't care who they were. And so I started looking at characters that I was, interested in their lives. I have to find a connection with them. You don't necessarily have to be, a prostitute or something like that, but something...
You've done one of those.
I've done a couple of them. But something humane about these people's lives that are unique. And so a famous local one would be Charlie Parkhurst, who was a stagecoach driver. And
female.
Well, now you let the, actually, yes, what you say is he lived his life as a male stagecoach driver, and then when he died, they were preparing his body and found out that it was actually Charlotte. And so she lived during a time where she couldn't have been a stagecoach driver if they knew she was female. And so I love her story, and there's lots of fun stagecoach stories. But I also, I love forensics, and so I portray Lizzie Borden.
And, from Chicago fame.
Well, Lizzie Borden, no, from Massachusetts.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
all right. I'm mixing her up with somebody.
Yeah, that's okay.
I do that.
There's so many characters there. And she was accused of murdering her stepmother and father, and she was acquitted, but largely the public felt that she was guilty. but I believe she wasn't. And one thing I've been able to do every time I performed her is 9/10 of the audience walks away believing she didn't do it because I believe she didn't do it.
You should become a lawyer.
Yes, that's. And then another character that I also love doing is Calamity Jane, because she's misunderstood, and she has, she had a great heart and she loved children, but she had her issues. And I love bringing these people to life, especially the ones you think you know, like Lizzie Borden or Calamity Jane. You think you know that story, and bringing something new about them that you didn't know. So the infamous and the famous are fun for me to do both ways.
I've actually visited her grave in Deadwood, South Dakota.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Next to
Wild Bill Hickok, and boy, his family didn't like that. They campaigned to not have her buried
they
there.
wanted to get her out of the cemetery.
They did,
like that.
yeah. So sometime comes to me do Calamity Jane, because she's fun and she's got a lot of information that I think most people didn't know.
So you've done, as you say, Western characters, but I've seen you perform a number of characters that go way back to early New England and so forth. How did you decide to go broad and start doing those kinds of characters?
Well,
for example, Anne Hutchinson, you did that character. Mary Perkins, my ancestor,
Yes, well,
a famous witch in the Salem witch trials.
Yeah, accused witch. Well, because I'm sitting right next to the main reason that I started doing those characters, because I shied away from them, not thinking that, it wasn't my area of interest and so forth. But Jay, you asked me if I would perform Mary Perkins Bradbury, and her story was fascinating. She was in Massachusetts at the time of the witch trials, and she was one of the accused. And she didn't end up hanging. She ended up being spirited away from prison. And
we're not sure how she escaped.
Yeah, we're not sure how she escaped. But then the hangings ended with a new governor, and then she was able to come back. But it was a fascinating story to me because it was just the hysteria of the time. And Anne Hutchinson was another very interesting. So once you brought those characters up to me and I was able to research them, I found that what I thought I knew about the beginnings of our country was not that what we were taught in school. And I see that the freedoms that these people fought for are still some of the freedoms we're fighting for today, and I don't mean just the women.
Hundreds of years later.
Yes. So fascinating. So I'm very grateful that you brought these, especially these two women up to me, because I wouldn't have pursued them on my own. So sometimes I do portray characters because other people suggest them. Not all the time. I still have to find something that I can connect with.
Yeah. Well, I didn't come up with Elizabeth Van Loo. Let's talk about her a little bit. Why did you pick her, and tell us a little bit about her story?
Well, she was another character that a friend brought up to me. This friend had wanted to portray herself, and then other things happened in her life, and she got away from wanting to do Chautauqua. And I thought, wow, a woman who lived in the heart of the Confederacy, but was pro-union. She was a unionist, and how? And she was upper society. She was part of society, her family was, and I thought, how did she accomplish this, and why? Why would she stick her neck out? And that's, when I read about her, I read everything I could about her, and I'm already a Civil War enthusiast. I don't know if that's a proper term, but I've always been very, very interested in the Civil War, but mostly the Union side. One of my favorite generals is Grant, as I know yours is, U.S. Grant. And so in researching her, I found that something about Virginia, the state of Virginia, I think is much like the state of Texas today in the way that there is I don't know the right term, but a statism where they're almost more proud of their state than they are of their country. And this was Elizabeth. She could not imagine Virginia leaving the Union. And but she had to be very careful because she was surrounded by Confederate sympathizers, and even before they seceded, she and her mother, who did not believe in slavery, had slaves, couldn't. When her father died, he wrote something into his will where they could not free their slaves, and so they were hoping by manumism it would help freeing them eventually. But in the meantime, they paid their staff. as
Yeah.
if they were workers. They paid them and they always treated them fairly.
But still enslaved.
But they were still technically enslaved, so there were little nuances there that kept them from being able to move about. But how she got started is when the battle started, Libby Prison was right there in Richmond where she was, and so
We'll have a picture of that.
yes.
Yeah.
And she and her mother said, well, we want to go at least ease the comfort of the Union soldiers. And at first they were turned away, and they appealed to the prison warden on the grounds of being Christians, doing the right Christian thing. They brought books and blankets and food. But the more prisoners that came in, the more that they found that these prisoners had been out, of course, with the Confederates and knowing where the Confederate fighting was. And so she and her mother started, which was very dangerous, slipping messages in books and picking the books back up and having messages come back out. And they had their
From the prisoners.
From the prisoners, and they had their own code system. And then they realized that they were able to perhaps help some of the prisoners escape, and they were part of the Underground Railroad, and they had stations set up. But two prisoners that escaped via the Van Loos told Colonel Benjamin Butler, of how they escaped. And so that's how he contacted through, very carefully indirect routes, Elizabeth, and asked her if she could spy for them. And so she had several spies that worked for her. There were several ways that, codes, which I don't want to disclose because I want
You got a performance to do.
No, I want you guys to come to this event. But there were various ways that they were able to get the messages across the line to let Benjamin Butler and as even Grant's men, when they were fighting close at Petersburg, to what was going on with the Confederates. And
this includes troop movements and things like that.
Troop movements and supplies and the trains and so forth, and so it was quite amazing, and I couldn't look away.
So we're still talking about her 150 odd years
Yes.
later. She was so good at her craft, but it sounds like she had quite a network that she had developed, and we'll show a photograph of her home. Her home figured in this too, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It was one of the places where some of the prisoners could escape and were brought to. When at one time, when they thought Richmond was going, she prayed that Richmond would be taken over by the Union so the war would stop. She prayed for the Union, for the Federalists to come in. And at one time, she was prepared. She prepared her home for them. But remember, this whole time
Don't have a Union flag in your on your front yard.
But she had her own house staff, which were technically slaves, but she considered former slaves, and other merchants in Richmond that were Unionists that helped her get things across the line. They also had a small farm across the James River, and so messages came from there and codes came from there. Amazingly, they knew if she was found out, or she and her mother were found out, they would be hanged.
Of course.
But she was, none of their spies or network were ever captured. They were never found out.
Courageous woman. I'm trying to remember the story, but didn't she have like a secret hiding place in her house?
Yes, she had upstairs in the library, behind a bookcase, a secret place. It would effectively end up being an attic space. And only one child, a servant's child, was up there and followed her when she wasn't supposed to be. The child wasn't supposed to be following Elizabeth upstairs when they were hiding somebody. And the mother of the child said, "It would be death to us all if you ever disclosed what happened." So one child, in the staff knew. But the ways that they passed messages, I can't wait to share that with everybody, because they never took any chances.
Yeah.
Never took any chances, even within her own home in the same room.
You haven't mentioned the tunnels.
The tunnels. Oh, the tunnels. Yeah, out of Libby. Oh, they dug tunnels, but there was this one time during the war where where the prisoners were able to dig a tunnel out of Libby prison and under the street and across the street, and they were supposed to be escaping and going to her home, but her own brother was being brought into the Confederate Army, and so she had to go attend to him. She wasn't home that night, and so her servants turned them away because
The prisoners who had just escaped through the tunnel.
Yes, and so many of the prisoners were recaptured, but a good portion of them did escape across the lines to Ohio.
And with the Freedom Trail, whatever it was called.
Yes, and yeah, the Underground Railroad. I mean, there's so many amazing stories, and I hope I can get them all in that evening.
Yeah,
Yeah, so-
absolutely.
yeah, but you're gonna
February
have to-
28th, remember.
Yeah, you're going to have to come see.
So, I don't want to say it's a sad ending to her story, but there was the fall of Richmond.
Yes.
She was there for the fall of Richmond. She experienced that. Would you say she had an enjoyable time in Richmond after the fall of the Confederacy?
You know, this was perplexing to me, but I wasn't her, and I don't have her personality. She was joyous that the federal troops came in. And as a matter of fact, she raised the first Union flag since the fall of Sumter.
At her house.
At her home.
Yeah.
She raised it proudly above her home. So they welcomed the Union soldiers in, and took care of the Union and the Confederates alike, the wounded soldiers. But she had spent all of the money that her father had left her in helping to free slaves, in helping to move information with soldiers, and she basically had nothing left at the end of the war. And on her behalf, several of the upper echelon of the Union soldiers on her behalf petitioned the government to have some money, given back to her, but that never occurred. So she was literally destitute.
But continued to live in Richmond,
She
the heart of the Confederacy.
When even during the Civil War and after, many of the Unionists, especially after the Civil War, I mean, for those of you who know about Richmond, it was burned to the ground, basically. And that was by their own Confederate soldiers. It was the Union soldiers that came in and put out the fire. But she continued to live there when many were forced to leave. She stayed there in her mansion, and she needed somehow to feed her mother and her servants, and she was not getting any help from the government.
Now, there's a famous United States president who stepped in at some point. Tell us about that.
Well, during the Civil War and Colonel Butler reported basically to General Grant, and those of you who know about the Battle of Petersburg and then the seizure of Richmond know that was largely Grant's men. And when he was told about Elizabeth Van Lew and her spy ring and the information that she had passed through, he felt that she was largely the most responsible for saving the Union at that point. And he never forgot it. And his first visit back to Richmond after the war, he had tea at her house. So she got to serve him tea, and
I wonder if there's a photograph.
She had a photograph of him in her home, and Lincoln, but I don't know that there's a photograph of them having tea.
I'll go look for one.
Yeah, please do, because I'd love to have it. But anyway, he made a special point to visit her because he believed that she was so responsible for the turn and the seizure of Richmond. So when he was elected president in 1868, knowing her situation, he simply made her the Postmaster General of Richmond, Virginia.
And as I understand it, nobody liked that.
Nobody liked that because she had kept a diary, and she hid the diary most of the time that she was keeping it. And then she went back while the fall of Richmond, she was found at the Capitol, of the Confederate Capitol, trying to find the papers. Because she didn't...
Jefferson Davis's files.
Right. And then she also told the government to please destroy all of her dispatches, because she really didn't want everybody around her to know what she did. But eventually they found out she was shunned. She was a social pariah. She never experienced any social graces ever again.
And she'd been a member of Richmond society.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when she was a young girl, Edgar Allan Poe read The Raven in her home.
Gosh.
Yeah, and there were other literary figures. But anyway, after this, she not only was destitute, but she was shunned by everyone, but she went to her job. She was going to be able to make money. She was credited for not only placing blacks in positions in the post office, but improving the system and finding positions for women. And even the most staunchest of her critics that were Confederates that would not speak to her eventually were forced to admit that she had done nothing but improve the postal system. And for all the years that President Grant was in office, she remained in office as the Postmaster General of Richmond. But once, as we probably well know the history, once Grant was out of office, the next administration was of the same mind as his,
And undid a lot of what he did.
And undid and pulled her out of office. And it was the only way she survived the rest of her life comfortably was she had administered to a dying prisoner who was I believe the great grandson of Paul Revere, and he was his namesake.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yes. And so their family, when they found out her situation, they set aside money to keep her, I don't know what you would call it, that we have a word for it today, but she had enough money to live off the rest of her life. And then when she was buried, nobody wanted to bury her there in Richmond, but they did, and they provided the headstone. That family provided the headstone for her.
Now, she never married.
She never married.
No children.
Nope, no children.
So she went to her grave with no family to speak of.
Yeah, she just months before she passed, her old maid niece had lived with her all her life. So her brother married, and her one sister married. She had a brother and a sister, but she never married. She stayed with her mom, and she had a mission in life. And there's, she did have a beau in her younger years who died early of, I believe, typhoid fever. And after that, she was one of those who felt she would never find a similar love. And so she dedicated herself to bettering her fellow humans' conditions.
What a story of courage, perseverance. I've read a book about her, and I just came away like you, having this incredible admiration for her. Last question, not about Elizabeth, about you and your craft. It must take an incredible amount of time and study time and research to develop a new character and perform that character. Tell us a little bit about your craft.
Okay, well, thank you for asking. Largely, it depends on the character. Sometimes there's not much known about the character, like the stagecoach driver Charlie Parker's. And then sometimes there's almost too much information known about a character. So when there's not a lot of information known about a character, the character is not as well known, then it's largely studying the time period, what went on, what they would have experienced, some stories that would have surrounded them. When it's somebody like Lizzie Borden or Calamity Jane, or I also portray Libby Bacon Custer, who was General George Armstrong Custer's wife. There's so much information known that takes a long time to sift through. So some of my characters have taken about even a year to study. And that's the resources that are available. Sometimes there's hardly any information and resources. Sometimes there's so much to go through, and then you have to sift down and compare, what stories are likely and what stories are unlikely. So I would say it depends on the character, but there have been characters that, like Libby Bacon Custer, Mary Perkins Bradbury, which I had to acquaint myself actually with the time period.
You can read the trial transcript.
Yeah. And with Lizzie Borden, there's trial transcripts. So it takes quite a bit. But I try to find also characters that are better than me. Like Elizabeth Van Loo. so much better than me. You know, because I sit there the whole time going, you know, would I have done that? Would I have come across country and you know, been a pioneer? And so I can live through them and learn through them and be a better person through them.
Yeah, and as you and I have talked many times, you tend to migrate to really strong female characters.
Yes.
And I'm hoping you're going to do, one of these days, Abigail Adams is one of top of my list for strong women characters.
She is. You know, it's funny, just very briefly, I have a good friend who is a very, considered a premier Chautauquan. And we've already found that we do 3 of the same characters. And so, and she travels about the country, so I have to be careful not to presume. She also does Abigail Adams. But in a new character that I'm taking on for 2027 is Mary Boykin. Now I lost her name.
Right. I know who you're talking about.
Yes. Why did I lose her name? Because I've just been reading.
We'll insert it into the
insert
recording.
it. Thank you so much. And so does Leslie. Leslie has portrayed her. But she's another very strong person during the Civil War, and she was a Southern woman out of Charleston. So she tells the Charleston story.
You're thinking of Mary Chestnut.
Chestnut, thank you, because it
Yes.
doesn't have a T. Yeah.
Her husband was Boykin.
Yeah, well, or her maiden name is Boykin.
That's what
But
it is.
Mary Boykin Chestnut, thank you
Yes.
so much. And oh my goodness, she wrote a very large diary. So that is going to take, I already anticipated, way over a year. But at least I know the subject matter.
You bet.
Yes.
Well, we're going to end on that note, everybody. I hope you enjoyed Kim's sharing this information about Elizabeth Van Loo. Just a quick reminder, our event is going to be at the J Resort Hotel in downtown Reno, a wonderful place. The price to attend and see Kim's performance, $30, a mere $30. You get her performance, plus you get a 3-course plated luncheon, which their food is pretty good because I've eaten there. And this is all going to be also co-hosted by the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. I happen to be a member, but you know, we're going to turn out in force, so to speak, to watch this. And if you want any more information about the event, you can go to the American Heritage Partners website, which is americanheritagepartners.org. You'll find more information there, and you'll be able to register to attend on the website. So we look forward to seeing you. And Kim, any last words for our audience?
I cannot impress enough how important organizations like American Heritage Partners are, because they keep history alive. Chautauqua, anytime you can see a Chautauqua performer, do so. It's keeping history alive. As a matter of fact, my business, Western History Alive, its motto is, history is made every moment, every hour, and every day by every one of us. Make our history count and keep it alive.
Amen. And with that, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you on February the 28th.